Inside every one of us, there's this incredibly complex network, an ancient system that's been wired for our very survival. But what happens when that system gets hijacked? What happens when some chemical intruder gets in there and starts rewriting the very circuits that guide our choices, turning a voluntary act into a compulsive, desperate drive? Well, today, we're going to journey deep into the brain to uncover the biology of addiction.
Think of it this way. This isn't about willpower or some kind of moral weakness. It's really about a biological hack. Seriously, imagine a programmer finding a backdoor to bypass a computer security, letting them take direct control. Drugs do something unnervingly similar to our brain. They create this artificial shortcut, a direct path right to its reward system, a system that was absolutely never designed to handle such an intense, direct assault.
So, to be super clear, let's lock in our terminology. From a medical and scientific point of view, addiction is defined as a brain disorder, and the key words here are critical. Chronic, meaning it's long-lasting. Relapsing, which acknowledges that recovery isn't always a straight line, there can be setbacks. And maybe most importantly, it's driven by long-lasting chemical changes in the brain. This definition is so important because it moves us away from stigma and puts us squarely in the realm of biology.
Okay, so our journey into the brain is going to follow a really clear path. First, we'll look at how the brain's control system actually gets hijacked. Then, we'll explore the natural reward circuit that drugs exploit. After that, we'll break down the vicious three-stage cycle that literally rewires the brain. Then, we'll look at the blueprint, the mix of genetics and environment that can make someone vulnerable. And finally, we'll pull it all together, reframing our whole perspective to really understand addiction as a disease of the brain.
Every story of addiction starts with a choice, but the disorder itself is defined by the loss of that choice. It's a central paradox. So let's explore how the brain's decision-making architecture gets compromised, step by step, shifting from a reasoned action to this powerful, compulsive drive that really seems to have a mind of its own.
This slide shows a really stark contrast. See, on the left, during initial use, our brain's CEO, the prefrontal cortex, is pretty much in charge. It's weighing consequences, making deliberate decisions. But on the right, in an addicted state, that control is just eroded. The more primitive reward circuit starts to take over, starts to dominate, creating this powerful, almost reflexive drive to get the substance that just screams louder than any rational warnings from the prefrontal cortex.
Now, to really understand how this system is hijacked, we first need to appreciate its natural purpose. The reward circuit isn't some kind of design flaw in our brains. Nope. It's an elegant, evolutionary masterpiece. It was designed to ensure our survival by making behaviors that are essential for life, like eating, connecting with others, and procreating, feel good.
This slide gets into the landmark experiments that showed us just how powerful this circuit is. As you can see, scientists set it up so rats could press a lever for a tiny electrical jolt to a very specific part of the brain. The results were, well, they were astounding. The rats would press that lever compulsively over and over, even choosing it over food and water. That brain region, highlighted here, is the nucleus accumbens, and this discovery also pointed to the critical role of a neurotransmitter you've probably heard of, dopamine. When the scientists blocked the dopamine, the rats just lost interest. They stopped pressing the lever, proving dopamine was the chemical messenger for this incredibly powerful motivation.
So, to understand this pathway, we have to start at the source. And it all begins right here, in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA. You can think of the VTA as a kind of factory. It's a cluster of neurons deep in the midbrain, and its main job is to produce dopamine and send it out.
From the VTA factory, that dopamine travels to a key destination, the nucleus accumbens, or NAC. Now, this is the area those rats were so desperate to stimulate. It's our motivation hub. When the NAC gets a surge of dopamine, it signals pleasure and reinforces whatever behavior caused it. It's basically telling the brain, hey, that was good, let's do that again.
And finally, the circuit connects up to the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. This is our center for planning, impulse control, all that high-level decision-making. The PFC gets the dopamine signal and mixes it with other information, helping us decide if that reward-seeking behavior is actually a good idea. It's the part of the brain that's supposed to apply the brakes. In a healthy brain, these three areas work together in perfect harmony.
All right, so now that we get the normal circuit, we can see exactly how drugs systematically corrupt it. Neuroscientists have actually mapped this out in a powerful three-stage model, a vicious cycle that gradually escalates, locking the brain into this compulsive, destructive loop. So the cycle has these three stages, and the scary part is they get worse over time and they just feed into one another. It kicks off with binge and intoxication.
Then it transitions into withdrawal in a really negative emotional state, and it culminates in preoccupation and craving, which, you guessed it, drives the cycle right back to the beginning. Let's break each one down.
Stage 1 is all about reward and building habits, and it's driven by a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. In this stage, the drug's effects are intensely rewarding, and the brain starts forming these powerful, almost automatic associations. This is where drug-related cues get what scientists call incentive salience. Now, this is a crucial concept. It means that the cues connected to the drug, the place, the specific objects, the people, they become just as motivating as the drug itself. The brain starts to crave the cues with the same intensity it craves the high.
So what's actually happening chemically to cause all this? Well, a healthy brain might release a little bit of dopamine in response to a great meal. But addictive drugs, they cause a massive, overwhelming flood. We're talking 2 to 10 times more than any natural reward. The brain, just trying to protect itself from this unnatural surge, adapts by reducing its own dopamine receptors. And this has a devastating two-part effect. First, natural rewards become less and less satisfying, and second, the drug and all its cues become intensely, pathologically motivating.
So after the incredible high of the binge stage comes the crash. Stage 2 is driven by the extended amygdala, a brain region that manages our response to stress and fear. As the drug's effects wear off, this system just goes into overdrive. The person now feels not just a lack of pleasure, but heightened anxiety, irritability, and a deep sense of unease. It's a state known as dysphoria.
The neurochemistry here is really a double-edged sword. On one hand, the reward system is now running on empty, depleted of dopamine, which leads to something called anhedonia. That's the inability to feel pleasure from anything that you once enjoyed. But on the other hand, the brain's stress systems are hyperactive, releasing neurotransmitters like corticotropin-releasing factor. This creates a state where you have less capacity for reward and a massively amplified stress response. And the only thing that seems to offer any relief is the drug itself. The final stage brings us right back to the prefrontal cortex, our executive control center. In this stage, the brain is just preoccupied with seeking the drug. This is where that intense, overwhelming craving happens. And critically, the very part of the brain that's needed to resist these powerful urges, the PFC, is now compromised. Its ability to control impulses and make good long-term decisions is weakened, which makes relapse incredibly likely.
Yeah, this analogy of a stop-and-go system is scientifically spot on. The healthy PFC exerts a powerful stop signal. But in the addicted brain, that system is impaired. At the exact same time, the go signal, which is driven by craving, becomes completely overwhelming. The brain is now basically wired for automatic, stimulus-driven drug seeking, even when facing devastating consequences.
But this brings up a huge question, right? Why do some people who try drugs become addicted while others don't? Well, the answer lies in this really complex interplay of factors that create a kind of blueprint for vulnerability. It's not just about the drug, it's about the unique biology and the life experiences of the individual.
And genetics, they play a massive role. Twin and family studies estimate that somewhere between 40 and 70% of a person's risk for addiction is inherited. Now, this doesn't mean there's a single addiction gene, not at all. It's what we call a polygenic condition, where lots of different genes contribute small effects, influencing things like how our dopamine systems respond or how fast our bodies metabolize a substance.
But here's the thing. Our genes aren't just fixed code. Our experiences can actually change how they function. This is the fascinating field of epigenetics. Think of your DNA like a giant cookbook. Epigenetics doesn't change the recipes in the book, but it can add little sticky notes that tell the cell to use one recipe more and another one less. Things like stress, trauma, and chronic drug use can add these sticky notes, altering gene expression in the brain's reward and stress circuits.
And beyond our genes, our environment is profoundly important. Traumatic events, especially what are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can physically change how the brain develops. They can permanently sensitize those stress circuits in the amygdala that we talked about, creating a lifelong biological vulnerability. For so many people, substance use then begins as an attempt to self-medicate the deep wounds of PTSD or anxiety or depression. And then on top of that biological foundation, social factors like peer pressure can be the trigger that starts and sustains everything.
So, having journeyed through the hijacked reward circuits, the three-stage cycle, and the blueprint of vulnerability, we arrive at a really clear, evidence-based conclusion. The science brings us to a new, and I think more compassionate, perspective on this profound human condition. And so we end with this question. If we understand addiction not as a moral failing, but as a disorder of the brain's circuitry, well, that has profound implications. It changes how we view those who struggle, shifting the focus from blame to biology. It underscores that recovery isn't just a matter of willpower, but it's a process of healing and actually rewiring the brain. And it challenges all of us to develop treatments that directly target these compromised neural circuits, offering real hope for what is a chronic but absolutely treatable disease.